This is Robin Burrow. I'm the president for Omnikron Systems, and I'm joined by my wonderful team today. I have the Omnikron team, Heather King, our training director, and Brad, our director of sales. Guys, say hello. Come off mute and say hello.
Hello.
Hola. Happy holidays. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Thank goodness it's only Tuesday. And then we're also joined by Jayne Groll and Manny Varela from the DevOps Institute. And we are going to have a fantastic, I could go on and on about the greatness of Jayne and Manny, but that would take up more time than we have today. So I will just let you know that Jayne and I have been friends and colleagues for many, many years, growing up from IT service management. And I will let Jayne and Manny tell you more about the genesis of DevOps and also kind of give you a pulse for where we are today. Before we get started, a couple little things. Now that you know you have full control over your screen, we want to hear from you throughout. So when Jayne says something and you have a question, chat it in. We'll either find the appropriate time to ask the question or we'll save it to the end. This is being recorded and you will have access to the recording, so no problem whatsoever. We always have a contest. So let me tell you about the contest. Somebody randomly gets a Starbucks card on their phone. Yay. So if somebody calls you during or after the presentation from a number you don't recognize, that will probably be Brad awarding you with a raffle of a Starbucks card. Our last time we had this, Sean from Comcast was our winner. And this is because Brad loves that Starbucks card. So in fact, I need to use mine. So he loves to send those out. So if your phone rings, you could be the raffle winner for the Starbucks card. Also, for those who are PMPs today and you look to accrue your PDU point, you need to stay the whole time. And be active, and communicate in the chat. We do save those chats for everybody, and we give them out afterwards. And there's an extra way to win an extra PDU. Heather put that up on the board, but if you fill out the survey, you will get 2 PDUs for today for filling out the survey and for attending the whole time. And things you might not have known is Omnikron is having a really good year-end special, and you can come here. We can send you this link afterwards, earn hot certificates and digital badges. But I just wanted to show this to you. We have all kinds of things. Oh my gosh, look at that, DevOps Foundations. And we have all kinds of classes, and when you click on these, they'll pop up for you. And you can get 2 classes for the price of basically one, $29.95, or 3 classes for the price of 2. It's kind of an amazing deal, $37.50. You can pick any 2 of these classes: security, big data fundamentals, Scrum Master Certificate, Cloud Technology Associate, negotiation for business leaders from our FBI hostage negotiators. So just wanted to let you know that we have this, and we'll send you the link. And please take advantage of that, especially if you have tuition assistance benefits that you have not used yet. You still have time. It's a really good opportunity. And with that, I will stop sharing. And I'm super excited to hear from Jayne Groll. And she's going to bring us up to speed on DevOps today. Thanks, Jayne. Welcome.
Hey, Robin. Thank you for that. And that's awesome. So I'm going to share my screen. So bear with me for just a minute. Make sure everything works the way that it should. And hopefully you can see my screen. Can you?
We can.
Okay, awesome. So welcome everyone. And thanks Robin and team for inviting Manny and I to present some DevOps insights to your audience today. There's so much going on in the IT world. I mean, I like to say that it is a great day to be in IT. I mean, Robin, you and I have been in the IT service management and IT space for probably a little longer than we want to admit to, but it's really, the evolution has just been really fantastic. So just to go through a couple of housekeeping things, as Robin mentioned, And Robin, I'm assuming you want me to speak to this.
Yes.
Um,
Or you
okay,
you
but
can it. You can. We did it.
Oh, okay, awesome. Okay, so we're going to go through really quickly. You get a PDU for attending. You get an additional PDU for completing the survey, and you will get your completion certificate at the end. Do you want to speak a little bit to your next webinar, Robin, before I move on?
Jayne, you're so good. Yes, you guys, the next one is for you if you have a ServiceNow instance, and even if you don't. But this is going to be, I've been planning and plotting on this one for about 4 months. It's the best practices for onboarding. And because Omnicron's been in staffing for 30 plus years, we have a thing or two to say about onboarding. But we figured out how to use your visual task board and your knowledge management system in ServiceNow for awesome, repeatable, scalable onboarding. Just won't cost you any extra money. You don't have to buy anything. You just have to, we're very excited about it. If you don't use ServiceNow, I'm sure you can replicate it in BMC or any of the others. And if you don't have anything, you can definitely replicate it in an Airtable or Trello. So please come to that. This one is near and dear to my heart. I'll be co-presenting with Bobby Payne, our ServiceNow instructor. So thank you for the plug, Jayne.
My pleasure. Okay, so again, one of the things I want to do today for those of you attending, you may have different experiences with DevOps and certainly perhaps some different definitions of DevOps. And so one of my goals today is to be able to talk a little bit about what DevOps is, but more importantly, why is it important now, right? Why has it reached the kind of critical interest that it has in crossing the chasm, in some cases faster than some of the other IT frameworks? Then we're going to do a very, very, very high level overview of some of the DevOps practices and principles, more from a talking points perspective, called out of the DevOps Foundation, delivered by Omnikron. We're going to talk a little bit about why DevOps training is so important, and in particular why it's almost more critical for DevOps than, say, some of the other frameworks based on its body of knowledge or lack thereof. And then I'm going to wrap up and talk a little bit about some of the courses that DevOps Institute has partnered with Omnikron on, and what those courses are, what those competencies are, and where there may be of interest to you as well. So hopefully this will cover a lot of topics. As Robin said, I really want this to be interactive and engaging. So if you have a question, chat it in. Robin will find appropriate time to ask it. We're certainly going to leave time at the end for your questions so that you come away with a really healthy understanding of DevOps in the IT space today. So one of the challenges with DevOps is, unlike some of the other frameworks that you may be familiar with, there is not a single body of knowledge. And we actually at DevOps Institute don't encourage a single body of knowledge, mostly because DevOps really spans the entire spectrum of IT. From how do you organize it, from an HR perspective, from a management perspective, from a team perspective, processes that sit under DevOps, automation, culture, humanity, and practices and principles. So there is a little bit of frustration about the fact that there isn't a single body of knowledge. And so there's also many interpretations of what DevOps is and what it isn't. This definition is what we've included in DevOps Foundation. It was built kind of organically through Wikipedia, and it really speaks to some of the key elements of DevOps. It is first and foremost a cultural and professional movement. Right, so it's people first. It stresses communication, collaboration, and integration between developers and operational professionals, later to add security professionals, while also embracing automation in the process of software delivery and infrastructure changes. So it's very much people first. It's automating redundant tasks, right, so that we can save people for higher level thinking and problem solving. It is very much about integration, not only of communication and collaboration at the highest level, but also integrating our practices and our tools. So Robin mentioned ServiceNow, looking at how do we integrate Puppet and Chef and Jira and Jenkins and all of the other elements within a traditional or more modern IT tool chain? And how do we embrace the communication and collaboration that goes along with that? If you look at the second paragraph, it's really about establishing a culture and an environment where really building, testing, and releasing software can happen very frequently, more reliably, right? Jez Humble, the author of the Continuous Delivery book, likes to say that continuous delivery releases should be boring. And that's one of the goals of DevOps, where in the past we may have had a 2 to 8 month cycle in terms of software delivery. We want this to become part of the norm. And we need to not only have the automation to support it, but we need to have the culture to support it as well. The world is going a lot faster. And in order to be able to maintain competitive advantage, as most of you know, IT has to go faster as well. So why is DevOps important now? Well, if you look at competitive landscape, the competitive landscape today is very, very different than the competitive landscape of old. So in the past, you might have two enterprises that had similar products that were really competing against each other based on their quality, based on their product, based on their demographic. And there would be, again, a traditional approach to competition. And then we kind of fast forward to today and we look at services like Uber and Airbnb, and we look at Amazon, and we look at really those that have really dominated traditionally owned vertical markets. And so your competitor, regardless of who you work for, may not be a competitor that you can recognize today. It may be some kid sitting in a garage writing the world's greatest app. And then you couple that with the fact that when we start to look at some of the traditions in IT, many of them were built around command and control. Many of them were built around waterfall software development. And now, again, fast forward to today and beyond, and we know that agile software development, cloud infrastructure as code has really emerged as more of a growing standard within organizations compared to, say, waterfall, on-prem, completely on-prem data centers and situations like that. I mean, the truth is we built IT as a community of specialists. And so I've been in IT a really long time. And so, in the early days, I come from the mainframe environment. We had a single operating system. We had developers. We had data center infrastructure folks, and then we had people like me that were more on the front end on the operational side. And so out of that grew more competencies and more specialties. And IT grew into an organization of silos. And some of those silos became so thick that we really haven't been able to overcome them. And DevOps does now require us to overcome this kind of specialty silo culture so that we have much more of a collaborative environment and teams, sometimes now called squads, that are much more cross-functional and knowledge is very, very actively shared. You have more organizations moving to the cloud. And as a consumer, you know this from your own mobile devices, we now have app mentalities where our apps update, overnight, unbeknownst to us and without necessarily being scheduled by us. So we now have app mentalities and expectations. And then we have to look at data. So with the increase in technology, the increase in automation, the business has a lot more data available to it. I know that Omnikron is doing training on big data. And big data is, we have all this data, what do we do with it? But with that data comes the ability to make faster decisions. And so as a result of all of these different inputs into where we are today, the net result is time to market has to increase. In fact, we've stopped talking as much about time to market as we're starting to talk about time to value. And so IT now has to migrate its practices to be more adaptive, to match to the digital transformations, and at the end of the day, become more continuous. And that goes beyond continuous delivery, really to continual improvement, to continuous delivery, and really looking at almost continuous operations. So one of the key benefits that DevOps brings to an organization is it takes us out not only of our silos, but it takes us out of our domains, right? So we're now actually encouraged to do systems thinking. So instead of developers thinking about development and infrastructure people only thinking about infrastructure and IT service management people only thinking about the controls of change management or the service desk, and lean only starting to look at value streams. Really, if you start to look at DevOps is encouraging organizations to apply systems thinking across the entire spectrum, whether it's the cultural aspects of an IT organization, the underlying processes, agile, lean, IT service management, continuous integration and continuous delivery, and the use of automation. You know, in IT, part of our responsibility is to automate the world, and yet internally, we have not yet embraced the amount of automation that's available to us to help make our value stream flow much faster and much more frequently. So systems thinking is a key element of both the culture and the automation, and then adapting all of the processes that sit underneath that. So within any system, if you've read the Phoenix Project, and we'll talk a little bit about the Phoenix Project in a bit, or if you've read the book, The Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt, you know, systems thinking is great, but the system is only going to be as successful as its weakest link. So if you look at the image on your screen right now, you sort of see the breakdown within IT. So we have software developers that are doing agile software development practices, most likely using some iteration of Scrum. And so they have a very incremental and iterative approach to developing shippable products. So out of each sprint, the goal is to be able to create some increment that potentially could be deployed, maybe not, but could be deployed. And so that's off kind of in one segment of IT software development, whether that's done in-house, whether it's done commercially. And then within DevOps, we have this kind of new paradigm of continuous delivery and continuous deployment. And so within that, we see a lot of the bones of release management for those of you that may come from the IT service management space. So we have the building and the testing and the deployment, much of which in a DevOps space is actually designed to be automated so that we can automate the testing, but testing now occurs much earlier in the cycle so that we can start doing test-driven development, right? We could do security testing, we could do QA really throughout the entire value stream. And then if you kind of look within this, you see some of the elements of IT service management or ITIL. You see change management, you see capacity management, you see release management, knowledge management, service level management, all kind of inside of this aspect of the value stream known as continuous delivery deployment, or you might even call it release, right? So release management now gains its time in the spotlight, and much of release management is scoped to be automated. And then the button is pressed, right, with continuous delivery, or in continuous deployment, I like to say the button presses itself. And then whatever the product is, whether it's a small increment or a full product, is now suddenly in production. And now we start to see practices like service level management, event management, post-production processes and automation, monitoring tools, event management tools that are actually now responsible for manufacturing and remanufacturing services in production. If you look in the upper right, there's a concept now known as site reliability engineering. If you have not heard yet about site reliability engineering, you will be hearing a lot more about it. It is a very modern approach to what I call continuous operations. Some folks at Google wrote a book on how they keep their production systems stable and reliable, and it has spawned a whole new series of practices about SRE or site reliability engineering. It's also spawned new roles, and DevOps Institute actually will be introducing training about SRE next year. But if you start to look at this entire system, right, the system will only be as strong as its weakest link. That's the theory of constraints. And in many cases in IT, the weakest link is the interfaces between each of these segments. So the interface between, let's say, Agile software development or Scrum into either IT service management, change management, release management, or continuous delivery and continuous deployment. And then post-deployment is the weakest link, the bridge between the release process and the post-production operational process. So we need to be able to start to think about organizational agility as opposed to just agility within side of software development. So if you start to look at what DevOps and continuous delivery has delivered, and this comes out of the 2016 State of DevOps report, you can see that these factors on the left together model continuous delivery. So good test data management, and we have test and deployment automation, and we have chunk-based development and continuous integration. If you're not familiar with continuous integration, it's really where multiple developers code separately and commit their work daily to an integration server that builds and tests the integrated code to see if there's any defects prior to it even going further downstream. To make sure that we're using good version control and to make sure that we have good security, again, earlier in the process. And if all of these things are in consideration, then the net result is less rework and lower levels of deployment pains, of fewer incidences, higher level of performance, right? Higher throughput, higher stability, lower change failure rates, and then identifying strongly with the organization you work for, right? The more successful you are, the more that you identify with your organization because their success is your success as well. So there's some very, very tangible results that are coming out of organizations that are doing DevOps. DevOps is based on a series of values. If you've not heard of the acronym CALMS, you just did. And it's culture, automation, lean, measurement, and sharing. So these are the key categories within DevOps. Again, it's one of the reasons why it's difficult to really capture this in a single body. It's about people, and it's about technology, and it's about efficiency in terms of lean. It's about being able to manage against data so that we are measuring our performance and making decisions appropriately. And then it's also about sharing, right? About active knowledge sharing, about really breaking down a lot of the cultural silos and the cultural walls that have prevented us from being able to really move a lot faster. So I think I've mentioned this a few times already, and I really just can't emphasize this enough. No matter what you read about DevOps, no matter where your path takes you in this journey, please remember that it is first and foremost about people, right? Cultures don't transform. Digital assets don't transform. People transform. People transform when they are inspired to do so. And people transformation is a lot more difficult than automation, than injecting automation, than being able to look at your processes. Really, people change when they're inspired to do so. So DevOps places a very strong emphasis on people, right? On cross-collaboration, on growing their skills, on moving them from what we call I-shaped specialists to T-shaped, multi-dimensional professionals, by giving them opportunities to provide input and feedback, by instilling them respect and trust. And part of IT's issues is we really don't trust each other, right? By giving them opportunities to experiment. Experimentation is a very core concept within DevOps, where, you know, it's fail fast is part of the goal, and that the risk taking is intelligent, right? And then, you know, DevOps, and if you've read the Phoenix Project, you know, the third way is about experimentation and learning. And we want learning to become a lifestyle, right? Here at DevOps Institute, you know, we are the continuous learning community because we want learning to become part of your lifestyle, because that's how people grow. And that's how people transform, and that's how people become innovative. Some of the organizations that have done the best work in DevOps are those that didn't read something in a book, but through a group of people came up with a new idea. Target introduced a concept called a dojo, where organizations within Target would check into a dojo, and they would be surrounded by agile coaches and ITSM coaches and automation coaches and DevOps coaches to be taught a new way of working, right? They didn't read that in a book, but that's now become a very, very common and emerging practice where other organizations are now standing up dojos. And that's the kind of knowledge that you get inside of a continuous learning environment. So as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, DevOps was really started to emerge through a book called The Phoenix Project by Jayne Kim and George Spafford and Kevin Bear. It's a great book. If you have not read it, certainly encourage you to do that. It's a business novel, so you will recognize most of the characters. You may be one or more of those characters. It's a great opportunity to set up a book club in your organization. But at the end of the day, the Phoenix Project brought forth 3 ways of DevOps. And by the way, if you've ever read The Groll, Jayne actively says that this is a little shamelessly taken from The Groll. But the first way is flow. So if we're going to be able to deploy more faster and more frequently, then we have to be able to increase the flow of work from left to right. Right, so part of that is really looking at your constraints, understanding what your weakest link is, and how you can overcome or at least mitigate some of those constraints. The second way is about feedback. That in a waterfall environment, feedback would be at the bottom of the waterfall. And as we know, climbing down a waterfall might be easy, but climbing up may be a little slippery. And so the second way was meant to shorten feedback loops so that there is a constant cycle of feedback that enables continuous improvement. And that's right to left. We call that shift left, where testing is done earlier in the value stream and where we use automation to bring us information back, and feedback from infrastructure teams and ops teams and release engineers and automation architects are all not only encouraged, but there's structure put around when and how those feedback loops can occur. A concept known as chat ops, where there's instant engagement, like Slack channels would be considered chat ops, where you can engage fairly instantly to the right resources you need. And then the third way is the most exciting and perhaps even a little the most scary, and that's continuous experimentation and learning, right? You really do want to create a culture where people are allowed to experiment. Organizations are holding hackathons these days, and they're allowed to take intelligent risks, and they're allowed to learn from failure, right? So in the old days where the blame game, everything got pushed under the rug, in a DevOps environment, again, the key word here is intelligent risk-taking, but recognizing that if you're going to fail, fail fast. And then, if you look at the last bullet, it is recognizing that the only way to become a master is to repeat and practice. And if we don't allow people to repeat and practice through experimentation, through learning, through failure, and again, through intelligent risk-taking, then they never will become masters. So some of the emerging DevOps practices and integrations that you would learn in class from DevOps Foundation, which is the basic class, all the way through to the competency-based practitioners. Certainly, I mentioned continuous integration, where developers work independently and then commit their work to be built and tested collectively. Continuous delivery and deployment, not the same thing. Continuous delivery is where the product is staged but not necessarily deployed. In continuous deployment, it passes through to production without a manual step. Continuous testing, this is really fascinating to me because I think everybody in IT has to learn 2 skills. Everyone in IT has to learn some element of coding, and everyone in IT has to learn some element of testing. Testing is now so pervasive, and even though it's automated, it still has to be authored. So continued testing is really critical to every IT practitioner. Value stream mapping comes from Lean. Value stream mapping, again, has emerged as a very, very critical activity within organizations because they map the entire chain from an idea to customer value delivery, and then they look for activities that are waste. And so the goal is to become much more efficient. DevSecOps is the integration of security with DevOps. ChatOps, I mentioned before, is instant engagement through tools like VictorOps or Slack. And Kanban boards, Robin mentioned Trello boards, a Trello board is a Kanban board where you can actually pull work through its various stages so that you can get more done. And then, DevOps would not be as successful as it is if it did not recognize and did not try to integrate with existing frameworks like Agile, Scrum, ITIL, Agile Service Management, Lean, and then, as I mentioned before, site reliability engineering. So DevOps on its own is not a framework. DevOps, to my mind, is a little bit like a super framework where it's going to connect the dots of everything we've done so far in IT and everything we still need to do. Automation is essential. There are too many people, frankly, that think that automation will get you DevOps. That's not true. You do need the people and the process aspects of DevOps in order to be successful, but you really can't do this without automation. When we start to look at interoperable pipelines, tool chain, you might hear the term tool chain or pipeline. In continuous delivery, if you're going to be continuous, automation is the best way to get you there. And with the interest and the availability of open source, and unlike in the past where you might have had a homogeneous suite coming from a single provider, today, if you look at this very short list of technology, and there are so many more tools that are available in the DevOps space, it really is about the year of the API, right? It's looking at interfaces in an interoperable tool chain that may be built on, say, a Jenkins platform. Jenkins has like 2,000 plugins, but where you really start to craft or architect your automation based on your particular needs and based on the tools that are available to you. And there is no shortage of tools. So the results are really tangible. And if you're interested in reading the State of DevOps reports, there's one produced each year. The one that I think gives us the best in terms of high-performing organizations is 2016. 2017 really focused on leadership and the importance of transformational leadership in terms of being able to guide an organization through the transformation. But if you look at 2016, high-performing organizations are not only outperforming, but they have much better employee loyalty. They're spending about 50% less time working on incidents, right? So they have less issues coming out of deployment. And so while the belief that going faster is going to give you more risk or more incidents, that's not true, right? They're actually finding half as many incidents because of all that pervasive testing. They're also demonstrating that quality is everyone's job, and that kind of points back to my belief that everyone has to develop some type of testing and coding experience. And then, the last bullet I think is really fascinating, and that's that taking an experimental approach to product development is actually improving IT's performance and the business's performance at the same time, right? Innovation occurs when we give people the opportunity to experiment and think, right? So again, let the automation do all the boring, redundant tasks, and let's let people do what people do best, which is higher level thinking and problem solving. So, Robin, do we have any questions up to now before I get into why is training important?
Well, I've been chatting up the board. So guys, if you've been so enthralled in taking notes with Jayne's presentation, check your chat, just hover over the bottom and make sure to take advantage of those links. And let's open it up for questions right now. Jayne, you've been going really fast, so I think people have been taking quick notes. And I have some questions, so I'll start with the first one. And this just might have been a comment that this might have been a Jayne speak, but you said people are less I-shaped and more T-shaped. What did you mean by that? That was kind of, and I don't know if I heard you correctly, but it was interesting.
Yeah, so there is, and I wish I could tell you that this is Jayne speak, but it's not. There are a couple of models that have been growing over time where If you look at most folks, particularly in the IT space, it's not limited to the IT space, where we're specialists, right? So you have database administrators, or we have software developers, or we have QA people. And so we're an organization of specialists. And specialists really have a single column, which means we're good at our specialty. Going forward, there's a lot of support for encouraging people to evolve into what we call T-shape, which means they still have their specialty, but they're developing breadth of knowledge as well as depth of knowledge. And so if you look at the T, and wish I had a graphic available right now to show you. I have a really good graphic, Robin, that I can send to you and you can distribute. It really does demonstrate that if you look across the value stream, we need to have specialists, but we need to have everyone having some level of breadth of knowledge. So that's not just talking points, right? They know enough about testing to do test-driven development, but they're not necessarily as competent as a QA specialist, right? They can code, like site reliability engineers can engineer for operations, but they're not necessarily software developers. So they're developing competencies that give them a wide range of skill while still maintaining one or more specialties. So we go from being a singularly focused I shape to a multidimensional T shape, and then just to give you, a little bit more spark, you could become pie shaped, where you have two specialties and still a breadth of knowledge, or even beyond that, become cone shaped, where you have multiple specialties and then a very wide swath of different skills.
So I think I am pie-shaped now, Jayne, but I'm working on it, okay?
Same here, right? Same here. Is that I'd like to think that I'm pie-shaped. That's a whole different, that's a whole different story for a different day.
That Weight Watchers program any day now, so you caught me on that one. But okay, I really, really like that explanation, and I am happy to take other questions from the audience, but relate this to me for a project manager. We have a high percentage of folks on the PDU call today that, like, how does this relate to me if I'm a project manager, all of this? Because I think a project manager is probably at least more than T-shaped, right? Because but how, in my life, if I've grown up as a, PM, running complex projects in Waterfall and now Scrum, what are some things I need to know about running a DevOps initiative? And you might be getting that into the training, but I just thought I'd throw that out there.
No, I appreciate that. And again, just kind of an off the cuff. And I'd of course love to think about that from a project management perspective a little bit deeper. But if you really think about it as a project manager who really has to know a lot about a lot of things, right? A lot of different areas, a lot of different competencies. So certainly a project manager needs to understand a lot about the business, right? And business processes. Needs to understand a lot about financial considerations, needs to understand a lot about certainly time management and good project management skills. So the project manager's key specialty, I would think, and again, really open to other thoughts on that, is really about sound project management principles and practices. But then the breadth of knowledge is I also do need to understand my business, and I do need to understand, like a BA would know a little bit of technology capability, so I know what's realistic or not. And my financial knowledge may be the financing of the project, but it may be also something about a cost benefit analysis or even revenue streams resulting from the project. So the breadth of knowledge that individual would need to have is pretty broad. The depth of knowledge, certainly about project management, and then take it to whatever other specialty comes along, could be based on their vertical market.
I think that's it's very wise, and thank you for letting me just throw things out at you. We also got a comment in addition to yours, Jayne, from Roger, who said, I think you have to come as the PM and understand Scrum and Agile Scrum fundamentals. And that's what most DevOps teams seem to utilize right now. So coming in as a stakeholder in that process and then participating at the beginning/end of each cycle.
Yeah, and I would even throw in automation. I would say that yes, absolutely, from an Agile and Scrum, but also knowing enough about automation, maybe even to the point of being a specialist to understand how in the project the automation can be integrated.
Excellent.
Because it is such a key element of it.
Yeah, there's a ton there. There's a ton, and I know you've referenced them. So I don't know how much is left on your presentation. So I'm going to let you continue now. Thank you for taking a pause there.
So again, a lot of information in a short period of time. And so, while we know that this collective body of knowledge is very broad, and I was kind of kidding with Robin, well, half kidding with Robin at the beginning that I went to 12 conferences this year. There's no lack of content about DevOps, right? So if you want to kind of research DevOps or you Google DevOps, there's no shortage of content. Making sense of that content from an enterprise perspective. Not only what is DevOps, I mean, I think that question is an interesting question, and we spent a year researching emerging practices. We don't even use the term best practice anymore because all of these practices are emerging, some in traditional forms like books, some in less traditional forms like videos, and other types of conferences or presentation. And so capturing and culling that into some type of meaningful learning has been really the responsibility of DevOps Institute, working through really valued partners like Omnikron, who are delivering, who are actually delivering the training. So why is training important? So part of DevOps, again, I mentioned this at the very beginning, can be really frustrating that there aren't 5 books or one guide or, some generally accepted publication for you to go to tell you how to do DevOps and what it's all about. DevOps is emerging through what we've coined as the collective body of knowledge. Now, if you think about modern learning, and, in years past, you might have gone to a book and read a book. Today, if you want to learn anything, you might go to YouTube, or you might go to a conference, or you might watch a webinar like this one. So how we collect these emerging practices really come from a variety of different sources. And to me, that's awesome. Right? That's awesome because we're not just pigeonholing our knowledge or experience into a single book or a single series of books that frankly are difficult to update. We know certain frameworks have not been updated in a very long period of time just because the publication cycle and all of the downstream activities that have to occur there. And each year there are new books and new presentations and new practices that are emerging. So DevOps Institute's job is really to make sense of that, to really pay attention to what's happening in the world and really being able to bring that to the learning public. And it's just a fascinating, really fascinating journey. So unless you are able to really go to every conference, listen to a lot of presentations, watch a lot of videos, and read a lot of books, training is the best way, not only to be able to kind of make some sense of that, but to share that experience with your colleagues. We know that in classes, oh, here it is. I forgot that. Sorry, Robin. I forgot my T-shaped, I-shape was in here. Yay. But really, training offers you really 3 elements. The first element is obviously knowledge, right? You want to learn about a particular topic. The second element, depending on the course, is certification, which is pride of experience. So it's demonstrating a competency and, more importantly, being able to be proud that you not only took the course, but that you absorbed the material. But the third aspect of training, whether you take training with your colleagues or you take training in an open environment, is sharing. Right? Talking to other people, and maybe it's solving problems in your own organization, or maybe it's just collecting information and insight from people that are on the same journey that you are, even though they're in a different organization. So training certainly has its place in DevOps. And as the years go by, DOI launched in 2015. I'm really starting to look at, kind of the emergence of what are these competencies that people need to have in order to become those multidimensional, transformed individuals that are really capable of handling this digital transformation. So this is that graphic I was mentioning, Robin, which is really, let's move from being just a specialist to being T-shaped. So we have broad general knowledge, but we also have our specialties, and then, you know, kind of evolving year over year, competency over competency, in order to be able to deliver not only that value to your organization, but to grow your career and grow your own skills. And so it is very much about being multidimensional, right? That the days of the siloed, you know, everyone with the same competency lives in the same silo is really starting to break down.
Jayne,
and so start here.
Can you go back for a second? I would like to hear from our participants. And we are coming up, we're going to close pretty soon, guys. So just stay with us. I want to hear from you. Everybody chat in. If you think you're an I, a T, a pi, or a comb. I want to just like, where are you at right now with your level of expertise? Definitely a pi. Yeah, I had something different in my mind when I was thinking pie shaped.
I know, right? Same here.
Right, I've got 2 T's. I've got 1 comb. Want to hear from more of you guys? Definitely a pie. I like it. Let's hear from more.
Okay, Robin, it's okay if somebody says, today I'm an I, because I really focused my career on this specialty, but now I know that I need to grow some broader base knowledge, and that'll be part of my learning journey.
Definitely. I've got higher than pi, so that's maybe a 3-prong comb, eh?
Love it.
Okay, question is, if I want to learn Scrum and Agile, what links or access do you have that will help? From Renee. Renee, I don't know if I said your name correctly. So certainly oh, thank you. Good. Renee, I like the way you spelled it. Brad can help you with that. We have great training for your professional Scrum certification, which covers Agile. And we can also send you more links for that. So I definitely recommend it. These days, it's as fundamental as, you know, ITIL foundations and some of the other very fundamental IT stuff that you've learned. So thank you. Good question. I'm going to send you $10 for that question, Renee, later. I'm just kidding. Okay, so I didn't hear from everybody. I have over 40 people on the chat, so I am going to work you guys. I really want to see this chat blown up. It's good for my and Jayne's self-esteem. So let me just hear more T's, more combs, more pies. Chat it up for me. Let me know you're there. And just
hey,
send
Jayne,
it
real quick, in the meantime, we have a question from Karen here. She was wondering if, she says, do legacy applications, those built 3 to 4 years ago that were not built with the DevOps concepts, benefit by restructuring components to adopt some DevOps concepts? Is it worth the rework for those apps versus the benefit gain for new application development?
So Heather, that's a great question, and I didn't address that in here because it gets into a little bit of depth. But I'm gonna encourage. I'm sorry, I forgot the person's name.
It was Karen.
Karen. Karen, I would really encourage you to do a little research on microservices. So one of the things that's happening with legacy applications is really doing an analysis to see whether these big monolithic applications can be broken down into microservices. And so microservices kind of take the application and break it into kind of a more modular approach where they're built separately, they can be deployed separately, and yet they're part of a bigger set of services. So can't get into a lot of detail about that now, but good segue, if you don't mind, into some of the topics that are covered in DevOps Foundation. But microservices really are kind of a new approach to how do you handle these legacy applications that were built with waterfall and, you know, are built and deployed together, and they're big and they're thick. So Are we good with questions?
I think we're good for a minute.
Okay, so let me just quickly talk a little bit about training because, you know, Robin, you and your team are very, very valued partners of DevOps Institute, and I know you've been delivering DevOps Foundation for a while now. And so, you know, like ITIL Foundation, like Scrum Master, you know, start here, right? Start by having a deeper than overview understanding of these practices, particularly cultural elements and how to work with people, you know, high level introduction to automation, to lean, to agile. And inside the course, there are some very, very basic understandings of what each of these are. So it isn't what is lean, but here are some of the key aspects of lean or some of the key practices of lean. Here are the emerging practices of DevOps, taking a deeper look at the 3 ways. And then, of course, being able to supplement that with exercises and facilitated discussions. It is a certification course. It is a course that is the prerequisite to what we call our DevOps Practitioner Series. So unlike other frameworks where you might be an expert or a master, we really took a year and looked at what are these competencies that are emerging, these specialties that are emerging, and also the broad-based knowledge that's emerging. And so far we've identified 5. Test engineering, again, not only for QA, continuous delivery architecture in terms of how to architect an automation pipeline, and some of the key elements of bringing continuous delivery. That's an interesting one because it's based on Jez Humble's book, but it's also includes some of Jez Humble's video series. DevSecOps, boy, talk about a topic that's just exploding, is the integration of security with DevOps. And so you're going to hear a lot more about DevSecOps over the next year. There are meetups and conferences very, very specifically about security practices inside of DevOps. DevOps Leader, one of my favorites. More than traditional leadership, it's about leading DevOps and some of the innovative approaches that have really emerged at being able to help organizations go through the transformation practices like value stream mapping and creating a squad model are 2 of the elements there. Next year, we're going to do site reliability engineering. I'm really excited about that. It is a new way for operations. So it's kind of, they didn't grow up with DevOps, but it really is kind of side by side with DevOps and really bringing IT service management practices in and automation practices into the post-production environment. And then not requiring a prerequisite for anyone that comes from the service management side, Agile Service Manager and Agile Process Owner, which is taking those same Scrum principles and applying it to process design and process ownership. So I think on that, I'm ready for any other questions that you may have.
All right. I am going to let the participants think a little bit. I'm sending you guys a couple more links. Jayne, thank you for that. There was a lot. Can you go back? Because the one thing that was really bumping up against my brain was the DevOps leader. And what happens, what happens is we all run off. The organization says, we're going this direction. And they start to get everybody certified, but the leadership does not get certified. And so now they've made a huge investment in their resources and in their people, but they don't really know how to guide their people any differently because they also don't have that training in tandem. So you did talk about it, but what is that good for, like, the C-suite or the VPs and directors? It really caught my attention with that.
So I had, and I don't get to teach very much anymore, but I had a chance to teach DevOps Leader at Jenkins World this year. So it was a great experience. And so the interesting thing about DevOps Leader is, to answer your question, Robin, is yes, but also to recognize that everybody's a leader. And so the goal of DevOps Leader is to help individuals think strategically, right? Regardless of your role, is to be able to help individuals in the IT space think strategically. The most successful organizations were the ones that were the most innovative. And so looking at some of the strategic practices that have really created value inside of an organization, practices like how do you design for DevOps, design your organization for DevOps? How do you actually do value stream mapping and what's associated with that? How do you look at your organizational structure? And we take a little bit of a look at the Spotify squad model and what innovative thinking and results have come out of that, and how is that built, and is that right for your organization? You're not Spotify and you're not Google, but there's a lot of good insight that comes out of that. So it really is helping people. I mean, when I started the class, the first thing I said was, my job is to help you think strategically. Regardless of whether you're a VP or a CIO or a middle manager, being able to think strategically frees you to be able to think innovatively. And I will tell you, it was my favorite teaching experience in recent times. So it is for the C-suite and for the senior management, but it's also really interesting to have that middle layer go through it as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. What other questions do we have?
And I'm sorry, because I know I've covered a lot in a very, very short period of time. So I'm sure everybody's got a little bit to process.
Definitely. I did have a question on value streaming. How many people here have done value stream mapping? Can you chat to me and let me know? It's one of my, it's super fun to do. And go ahead. You want to say something?
I do. You know, one of the things I did not include in here are, and Robin, you're going to get a lot more information about this very shortly, is DOI's releasing in 2018 some courses we call drill downs. And so they're not certifications, but they're practice specific. And one of them is value stream mapping for DevOps. And it was authored by Mike Orzen, who's very, very well known in the lean IT space. So that's going to be coming your way very, very early in January.
Okay, that's really good to know. Thank you. And Tracy said she hasn't done it. Some people, it's really an amazing thing to do, value stream mapping. There's different ways to do it, but I look forward to the DevOps drill down on that. And guys, you know, of course you can get all these classes from Omnikron because, you know, we're accredited to do that. So if there's anything here that sparks your interest as you're doing planning for next year and you're getting together with your team, please let us know. And we are very good at sort of crafting out who's on the team, who's customer facing, who's back end facing, who needs what. And we're very, very good at that. We'll coach you through that whole process. Jayne, I had another question for you. The Google book that you recommended on systems thinking, I think it was on your slide of books, but do you remember the name of the book?
Yes, it's called Site Reliability Engineering. You'll see, if you Google the book, Site Reliability Engineering, very, very readily available. I think O'Reilly published it. But also I would suggest doing some research on SRE, Site Reliability Engineering. It is probably one of the newest up and coming practices. Not born of the DevOps space, by the way, kind of grew up in parallel, which I just find really fascinating. And a really interesting, not only set of practices, but a kind of a new role that's growing up, and the enterprise is starting to pay some attention to that.
Does it mean what it sounds like?
It's reliability engineering. It's what's interesting, and again, we can, if you want, Robin, we can do a whole new webinar about this, but it is about engineering for operations. So SREs, or site reliability engineers. I went to a conference, and there's one in Santa Clara, I think, in March, SRECon, and it is about being able to engineer automation for operations. So one of the key competencies is coding. And it is about handling change management and service level management, and kind of a cross between a post-production technologist and a IT service management individual. But it is about creating a reliability practice. Really fascinating.
Oh, that sounds really good. You got my interest on that. Well, guys, thank you. Thank you for that. I want to point out in the chat, and we'll send it to you. Last time, one of our audience, one of our participants, Mary, asked about could we share sample forms from the last webinar that we did. So we did open up a Google Drive, and I've shared that with you, still left over from before. So if you have like an awesome template, or you want to see my favorite little Gantt and my favorite, I have a really cool PM template that I did share with you. So go ahead and get to that link, and you can pull this down for being part of the community. And also, if you have an awesome template that you want to share with the community, please do. Just strip it of anything that we should not see. Also, Jayne mentioned microservices, and I don't know if you were here, but we had one of the world's leading experts on microservices talk a couple times back, Chris Richardson. So if you find our YouTube channel, good luck, because I can never remember the name of our YouTube channel, but I know it has Omnikron in the name. We do posts on YouTube, and you can see a little bit more about microservices. Heather, Brad, Manny, let's open it up, Heather, to all cameras before we close out, and just see if there's any other questions that anybody else has, or any closing comments from the team here, and then we'll go to our green room. But any other comments, Manny, Brad, Heather?
For me, none for me, other than I sent everyone a chat. For those of you still in here, we have oodles of stuff that's going to be sent your way. Not only will you have a copy of the presentation and the recordings, but you'll get a certificate of completion to show that you did earn your PDU. And then, of course, we will be sending the chat as well. So be on the lookout for tons of emails from me in the next 24 hours. So if you have any questions about anything I send you, don't hesitate to let me know.
And Robin, if you don't mind, I would like to say something. You know, Omnicron, you guys were really early adopters of DevOps training. I mean, I think you were, and you know, we're very grateful at DevOps Institute that you had, you know, the foresight and the trust in us to be able to take this forward, and we really value that relationship. So I just wanted to say that publicly, because I think it's important to understand that Omnicron really was one of the first to market.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jayne. Thank you.
Always great working with Omnikron.
Appreciate that. We really like working with you guys too. Manny, you guys are so responsive. It's really a good team. It's super fun to see how this is, you know, coming along. And I think as DevOps is putting together more practices and training and you know, equipping, I think you guys are doing a good job of learning from the past and, you know, just bringing over the stuff that we need and creating it quickly. So, because we do need it quickly. So good job to you as well. Kudos to you as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
I hope somebody wins from the East Coast or the Midwest on that, so they can get some hot cocoa from Starbucks. That'll make me feel good.
It is National Hot Cocoa Day. I hope you realize.
See, there we go.
National Hot Cocoa Day. That's awesome. You guys, thanks very much, and we will see you soon. We have another webinar coming up that we already talked about, so have a great day. I hope you win. Good luck, and we will talk to you all very soon. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you.